welcome everybody to this week's community call. Hopefully everybody's had a wonderful week, and also previous week when there was no community call, unfortunately, because now they are bi-weekly. My guest today is Jaya, who has been on the community call quite a few times, but not for a while. How have you been, Jaya? What's up?
I have been very well, and I'm super happy to be here, and I'm super happy to be on this call in particular now because I'm so excited about a lot of developments that are happening, and especially the topic that we're going to speak about later, namely the intersection of privacy technologies and artificial intelligence, which is something that I find deeply interesting, powerful, and exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that. But first, let's go through our news item. And by the way, Jaya, if I'm missing any details at any point, just stop me and jump in.
Sure.
Starting with Monerotopia, which is in Mexico City. And on Monerotopia, we announced, which you probably already saw, the Nym Monero integration, which is super exciting. You guys probably know about Monero. It's one of the OG privacy tokens in the crypto space. And now you can use it over the Mixnet using NymConnect. So a link to the blog post will be shared in the chat. Please check it out. It's super cool stuff. Moving on to the Vibe Check survey. And actually this one I'm going to be asking you about, Jaya, because this is a pretty big thing for us right now.
Yeah.
Many of you probably, if you spent any time on our channels in the past few days, you probably ran into this survey that we're running right now. It's basically a sentiment survey. We want to understand how you guys feel, how it feels to be part of the Nym community, and how you feel about Nym in general. And we've seen about, I think, combined 200 responses so far, which is absolutely huge. So thanks for everybody who already filled out the survey. And if you haven't, and if you have anything to share with us, any feedback, then please make sure to fill it out. A link will be shared in the chat. Jaya, you want to say a few words about what this project is about?
Absolutely. This past year has been a kind of pretty crazy year in the crypto space in general. The market has been a bit of a rough ride for a lot of people, and that's been happening at the same time as we have become more and more aware in the Nym team that we've been a little bit inward facing in our development lately. So, we're doing a lot of work in the background to optimize the Mixnet, build out the bits and pieces necessary in order to ensure that people can use the Mixnet in a privacy preserving manner. Things like ZK NIMs and the kind of building blocks that really connects the end user, the token, and the core infrastructure that some of you are helping us operate. And so this, a lot of this work has been going on a little bit in what I feel like is maybe a bit of a silo. And I get the sense that you as a community maybe have been feeling a little bit out of the loop sometimes. And so this survey is like an important, super important first step for us to start like working a little bit closely with all the fantastic people that we do have in our community and get some of your experiences and expertise in this area now that some of you have been around with us for quite some time and have been using our technologies and operating our technologies and holding the token. And so your experience is extremely valuable for us. And it comes at a very critical point because we are also doing some very important strategic work at a company level right now that's going to define, the next many months and possibly years of the project to really kind of step up to, the next set of challenges that includes, mass adoption. And so getting, really kind of getting the community's expertise, the community's thinking, the community's sentiment at this point in time, it provides us with a hugely valuable boost to make sure that we're steering things in the right direction and that we are taking on board the feedback that we're getting from you and kind of transforming the relationship a little bit towards something that's more collaborative going forward. So that's the context. Thank you so much to everybody who's responded so far. We'll be sharing some of the results from the survey with you guys as well. I think it's probably quite interesting for everybody to understand a little bit more about who's in the room with us. And yeah, that work is taking place over the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that.
Do you want to foreshadow the upcoming surveys by any chance?
The upcoming surveys, yes. Well, there's going to be one more major survey. So this initial one it's a vibe check, right? It's understanding where sentiment is at the minute. The next survey is going to go a little bit more in depth about, what you guys care about, the kinds of operating systems that you're using, this, that, and whatever, so that we make sure that, the type of information that we're sharing with you is relevant, the way that we're building out the technology is usable, and so on. So there will be one more survey coming out early next week, and hopefully we can get as high numbers of participation. So yeah, hugely appreciate the input so far.
Yeah, thanks again, guys, for filling the survey out. It's absolutely huge for us at this stage to get your feedback. And moving on to the next news item, which I'll also probably be asking you about a little bit, Jaya, the Delegators Program. So as you guys know, we recently launched a Delegators Program. The submissions are open currently until Monday. Due to popular demand, I extended the submissions a little bit, which, to be completely honest, might have been a mistake because now we have like a large number of really amazing submissions. So it's going to be very hard to choose. I kind of messed up there. Jaya, let's talk about the Delegations Program a little bit. So what's our goal with the Delegations Program?
Our goal with the Delegations Program is quite simple on the surface of things: decentralization. This is the primary goal from the project perspective, right? So, Nym as a mixnet, it needs to be decentralized in order to ensure the security of the system, in order to ensure that it remains trustless, and in order to ensure accessibility to the mixnet. There is the concern of the project itself, but there is also the concern of the node operators, right? So, we've now kind of got to a stage where we have a number of people in the room that have been running mixed nodes for a while, and they've developed, their own sets of expertise, which, is kind of knowledge that can be kind of passed on to new joiners in order to help decentralization and support decentralization of the network. And so we want to kind of really facilitate that and start building out a bit more, or supporting the evolution of a kind of community amongst mixed node operators. So a little bit of kind of mutual support, mutual aid, sharing of knowledge, and that really strengthens the network overall, because one thing is trustless architectures on a technical level, but having a strong immune system as a network in terms of like developing, good social relations between operators is something that shouldn't be underestimated, even from an information security point of view. So the first step to doing that is the Delegators Program. It's starting to connect people up with mentors, starting to share the knowledge, and then, of course, all the way through to the hardcore dynamics of the token economics, right? So some of you might have tried to start up a mixed node, and of course, at this point in time, you need a good chunk of tokens in order to achieve a reputation that's gonna get you into the active set and start to actually earn rewards. So to balance that out a little bit, that's what we're doing from Nym Core is to support people in that kind of initial period where they don't have enough reputation in the community to achieve the kind of staking volume that they need to get into the active set. So that's what the Delegations Program is aiming to do, and I can't wait to go over the applications with Sudo and make sure that we achieve a mixnet that's truly global and truly decentralized, and with a strong kind of community vibe.
Beautiful. What I would add to that is a bit more about the mentors. This shroud of mystery surrounding our mentors so far, but not for much longer. So your mentors will be introduced soon. And during the next community call in 2 weeks, probably we're going to be introducing you to both the mentors and maybe even some participants. Token economics is set up in a way where trust is very important, and kind of knowing each other and running the mixnet together, like the relationship between delegators and mixnet operators is very important at kind of like the incentives, economics, mathematics level. And it's really nice to see that it's also working out in practice. So all of our major node operators who are very successful and have multiple nodes at this point, and a lot of delegators trust them with their delegations, they also happen to be, in the vast majority of cases, happen to be active contributors to the community. So the other goal of the Delegators Program is to share their best practices so that you can also become contributors and get recognition in the community. And then, based on this trust-driven system, become successful node operators. So I'm really looking forward to actually kicking off the program itself. So for now, we're in the submission stage, and stay tuned for further updates. Moving on to our next news item, there is a pretty big Gleam campaign going on right now. So there's like an ongoing educational effort on our part to teach our community about staking in general. It's one of the funky little use cases I just mentioned, trust. Well, through staking, delegated staking, that's how you pledge your trust in mixed node operators and their mixed nodes. So to educate people about that and make it a bit more fun, we launched a Gleam campaign, which has a prize pool of 18,000 tokens, and some lucky winners may even see their balances doubled. So a link was shared, I think, in the chat, hopefully. Yes, I can see it. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, then make sure to join, and you can find more information on the link. The next news item is Harry's speech at the American University of Beirut, ChatGPT and AI. It was yesterday. Do you know, Jaya, by any chance, if there was a recording or there will be a recording to this? Because I would die to hear it, but I was not able to watch it live.
Yeah, I mean, my day yesterday was totally packed as well. I know that there was a link that was shared, but I think actually Yana is in the room. I think Yana would try to listen to it. Maybe Yana knows if she managed to. Yana, do you want to get on stage for a minute?
Sorry, hello. Sorry for the background noise. I am in a bus. I wanted to listen to it and I didn't manage to, so I'm looking forward to that link to the speech of Harry's myself. I'm so sorry, but really nice talk there was yesterday from Ahmed. It was so interesting together with Tess for Privacy from Monero. It was really legendary. I loved it so much. So that one can definitely listen to because I know this already. The one from Harry's, not yet.
Okay, great, thanks. So in case anyone didn't quite understand that because of the background noise, basically Ahmed was giving a talk yesterday as well, which Yana did manage to catch. The link to Harry's talk didn't quite work out, but Ahmed Kapoor is GC at Nym, for those who don't know, and he gave a presentation at Yale University yesterday. Let me just see if we can dig out here's a tweet about it, and I believe there's a link to the recording as well. Yeah, so definitely catch that, and as soon as we get a hold of Harry's talk from Beirut, we'll share that as well.
And also, by the way, on that note, Yana is our front-end dev, and she was a guest on the community call previously, and also hosted one herself. So if you want to check that out, then there's a community call playlist on our YouTube channel. Make sure to visit it, and then you can find my conversation with Yana. Super interesting. Thanks for jumping on stage, Yana. The last news item that we have is a very happy one. So Not Just Verify, our good friends and contributors and mixed node operators, and I'm not going to list everything because then we will be sitting here for the rest of the day. We're nominated for Startup of the Year in Neuchâtel, which also happens to be the hometown in Switzerland of Nym. So congratulations for that. A link will be shared in the chat. You can vote for them. Please do that because they are pretty amazing, if I do say so myself. Let's get them to actually get the prize as well. Now that we're done with the news roundup, let's move on to my conversation with Jaya, because you haven't been on for quite some time. So I have some brief topics to cover before we jump into the meat of the conversation today, which is going to be privacy and AI. Most of the things that that I put on my list to ask from you, we already covered during the news roundup. So, the Delegations Program and all of that stuff. So let's talk first about something that we've been struggling with for quite some time now, especially you, I would imagine. So we're looking for a lead content writer. What's that like?
Yes. So look, maybe it's because I care so much about content myself and am a writer, and so therefore maybe my demands and criteria for a good writer are very stringent, but it has been a challenge to find someone very good to fill this role. I do have two fantastic candidates that I just found today, I can reveal. But yeah, we've been looking for a content writer, which when it comes to a project like Nym can be a little bit tricky because we're not just a blockchain project. We also have a mixnet, which is a fairly unique kind of technology, and for someone to really understand the relationship between, the Nix blockchain, the Nym Mixnet, and be able to translate that to both technical audiences and a general public, especially in the kind of climate that we have today, is quite a unique set of talents. And when I say the climate that we have today, I'm referring to both the kind of the market conditions in terms of crypto, but also, regulation in that area at the minute, the regulatory kind of clampdown, and also the state of privacy and privacy debates amongst the public at the moment, which is not looking too good either. So someone that can really navigate all those topics and work closely with me on the content strategy, on the narrative, and reshaping the kind of the brand vision in terms of content it's a unique set of talents that we're looking for. But I have found some unique people in the past couple of days. So thanks for those of you who might have applied.
Unique indeed. We still shared the link to the job posting. Please check it out if you yourself think you would fit that very tall order that Jaya just shared. There, you fit that unique description, combination of things. Then make sure to apply, or if you maybe know someone, then make sure to let us know and refer them.
Yeah, I think the interesting part of this particular job is, I think those of us that are kind of in the room now, we might have like a fairly innate like interest in the topic of privacy. It's something that's important to us. That's why we're here. That's why we're working on this project. But privacy still remains like quite an abstract concept for a lot of people in the world. And so when it comes to like developing content that resonates with people and developing content around a set of technologies that can resonate with people, it is quite a challenge, because you need to kind of think one step further or a few steps before the concept of privacy. What I mean by that is like, what does privacy actually, when you have privacy, what does that actually enable people to do? So it becomes something that people can relate to a little bit more, right? So, okay, if you have some privacy technology, does it allow you, better connectivity? Does it make you feel empowered? Does it make you, what is it that it actually does for people? This is the kind of key step that we need to start to articulate, not just at Nym, but in the privacy technology industry more generally. It's really time to take that next step towards something that can resonate with people's imagination and life experiences.
Yeah, that's very true. And even in my private conversations about my job and privacy in general, it's very challenging to find the right ways that are not alienating for people, that don't feel like overly rebellious, to make the case for privacy. It's often very difficult. So yeah, it is a challenge indeed. And if you're up for that challenge, make sure to apply for the position. Moving on, which is a bit of a segue into our main topic. Last week, was it last week? Was Web Summit last week? Every week feels like a year at this point.
I think it was last week, but yeah, I can't. Yeah, it was.
So you were there. How was it?
Yeah, so I was at Web Summit, which was the first Web Summit to be held in Rio. For those who don't know, the Web Summit is one of the world's largest technology conferences. It is not a Web3 or crypto specific conference. It includes, the typical companies from Web2 all the way through to the cryptoverse. It's a very interesting mixed bunch, and it normally takes place in Lisbon in, I think, November, December. But like I said, this is the first one that took place in Rio, and they have, I believe, an agreement with the mayor of Rio to continue a yearly event there for the next 6 years. So this was just the beginning of Web Summit in Latin America, and it was an incredible experience. It was very, very good, and I got the chance to meet our community in Brazil, which was amazing. I met João in person for first time, so that was really great, and a bunch of the Zcash local Zcash community too. So yeah, there's lots and lots to say about Web Summit. Where should we begin?
Well, there is a very distinct place to begin, but for context, guys, João is our amazing Jay the Pizza Man, aka Pizza Jay, who's also responsible for creating pull-ups for these events. So Jaya and him just met for the first time in Rio. All right, so where we should probably start is the masterclass with Meredith and
Chelsea Manning.
Chelsea, exactly. Thank you very much. So let's talk about that a little bit, because that goes like ties really nicely into our topic for today.
It does. So maybe we should end with that when it comes to Web Summit, and I can talk a little bit about what else we did before the masterclass. So at Web Summit, we partnered up with, because I think there's like a lot of interesting things to say about like what it means to have a Nym presence in Latin America and in Brazil in particular. A lot of that has to do with also people's relationship to technology, which is quite different from place to place in the world. And I think what struck me about Web Summit was how open people are to new ideas, very open and super keen and interested and intelligent in terms of the questions that they have. That for me is quite a big contrast to Europe, where people seem a lot more jaded, a lot more skeptical. The mood is very, very different and the kind of level of debates are feel a little bit tired here. So I think that's the first thing to note. And but of course there's also another set of interesting relationships. So, Nym, we have our base in Switzerland, and there seems to be some quite interesting relationships between Brazil and Switzerland in particular when it comes to the development of technology. And so we were working closely with a group called SwissNext that in fact supports Swiss startups in Brazil. And they gave us quite a bit of good insights into, how people are really trying to build technology in different ways. And so the relationships between Brazil and Switzerland are quite different from what you might expect in China or in the United States, which is, typically the nations we think about when we think about who's leading on technological innovation right now. The reason why I say that is because I think many times people tend to think about technology as if it's like a race in one direction, right? But actually, technology and technology development is always an expression of the priorities of a given society. And so, if you do go around, travel around the world a little bit and have a more open mind to what's going on, you'll start to notice how many different ways we can evolve and develop in terms of innovation and technology. And I think that's what's so fascinating about, working with Nym community in different parts of the world, and seeing, how alternatives are starting to shape up in other places. Because quite frankly, the way that things have been developing under the leadership of the United States tech industry has been disastrous, as probably a lot of us in the room would agree on. And China, when it comes to surveillance, there's a lot of issues there too in the direction that they're putting forward. So for me, that was another kind of high level interesting takeaway. But to get to the masterclass, so Nym did a whole bunch of things at WebSummit. So first of all, we had Chelsea opened the entire WebSummit with a main stage fireside chat. And then we had Alexis give a number of presentations with Swissnex. I gave a number of presentations and interviews with Swissnex as well. And then we did this major masterclass. Now, the focus of the masterclass was the intersection of AI and privacy technologies. For me, this was like the core highlight of the event, because a lot of people, this was the beginning of really putting privacy technology at the core of debates about artificial intelligence, because a lot of people don't quite understand, how closely related these two developments are and why privacy technology is so important for the way that the future of artificial intelligence will shape out. I just saw a question in the chat. Unfortunately, it was not video recorded, but we do have the audio recording. So we will share that.
Oh, we do. I never knew. I want that, like ASAP.
So just before we started the masterclass, I had a chat with one of the WebSummit organizers, and they informed me that they did not record the masterclasses, and I think it was their way of trying to make these things very exclusive somehow. But from our perspective, we obviously want to share this as far and wide as we possibly can. So I found one woman she creates podcasts and is part of a news syndicate in Latin America and Spain. And so she's very kindly shared the recording that she managed to get from the session. So we'll put those out.
Can we put it out, like legally speaking?
Yeah, we can.
Piracy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, amazing.
Yeah. And if there's any problems, I'll take them on.
So then,
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, please ask a question. Otherwise, I'm just talking.
Yeah, but we kind of like that. I don't know if the audience agrees, but I definitely like when you ramble. So anyways, all right. So my first question about privacy and AI, which kind of ties into the masterclass as well. So what was discussed by and large? And maybe let's talk a little bit about Meredith, because people probably know on this call Chelsea Manning, who's our security advisor, but maybe some people are not familiar with Meredith, who's I would say is a shining star of the privacy space in general. So maybe let's introduce her.
Absolutely. So when we were organizing this masterclass, I had a dream lineup in mind, which was Chelsea Manning, Meredith, and ourselves. And the reason why I wanted Meredith Whittacker on board is because her career trajectory is quite like her personal career trajectory kind of explains this entire, like the political economies of this entire industry and the relationship between privacy technology and artificial intelligence. So Meredith Whittacker is the president of Signal Foundation. So she recently took over, and about like half a year or so ago, and I was very excited when that happened, because previously to that, she was the co-founder of an institute called AI Now. And AI Now, I think they were founded maybe 2017, 2018, something like this. But they were founded by, a bunch of critical researchers and computer scientists who had been in and around, the US big tech industry and AI development for quite some time. And we're starting to notice, and write up a bunch of issues around the way that artificial intelligence is being developed. So the AI Now Institute have been putting out a number of reports that look at, that really look across the entire sector, right? So instead of being this kind of like hype machine that a lot of, material that's produced around AI tends to be, They look at everything from the working conditions to the concentration of economic power to who's funding this stuff to, the environmental impact, to what does it actually mean to develop large language models in terms of the concentration of knowledge and power in the technology industry. So the fact that Meredith, and before AI Now, she was at Google, right? And she led a whole number of, she was part of a whole number of very important protests that happened by Google employees, including protests against the use of a contract that Google had with the U.S. Department of Defense on drone strikes and providing, developing artificial intelligence for automated weaponry. So, this is a person who has shown, over and over again that she has, really good integrity and, politically and socially in the way that she goes about working with technology, and also draws the line between, the artificial intelligence industry and privacy technology as an intervention into that. So for me, I was very excited to have her speak alongside Chelsea. I thought they would give the fully rounded picture of what's really at stake in this area. So the way that the masterclass flowed was I gave a short introduction, just providing the context, which was pretty much the kind of context that I've just provided to you guys. And then, but I also went a little bit into a rabbit hole around privacy washing, which maybe we can pick up that topic a little bit later in the call, Pseudo, if you want. But so provide a little bit of the kind of context. And then Alexis introduced Nym. So, we went really kind of low level talking about the Nym Mixnet and what the Nym Mixnet, can do in the context of artificial intelligence. And I can kind of summarize those. Yeah, maybe I'll just summarize those now, actually. The way to kind of understand Nym specifically and what we're building specifically when it comes to the artificial intelligence industry is, first of all, the Mixnet is something that you might have heard Claudia speak about this a little bit before, but the Mixnet protects against metadata surveillance, right? Now, why does this matter when it comes to artificial intelligence? It matters because metadata is food for machines, right? It's a kind of data that machines can process very, very well and do large scale statistical analysis on very, very well. So this is the first thing, the Nym Mixnet protects against machine learning driven surveillance. But that's kind of almost at the end of the pipeline, right? So the way to think about AI or the kind of AI industry in general is by thinking about what I call the data pipeline. So it's, everything from, when and how and who produces data in the first place and who it's produced about, all the way through to the way that it's labeled, categorized, who can access it, the access conditions, the market dynamics around accessing data, which, I think all of us know is pretty fucked up, all the way through to it's the final product, which is what a lot of people end up experiencing as, ChatGPT or Midjourney or, these apps that feel, fun to use. But behind all that, there is this massive data industry fundamentally. And privacy technology is interesting because it interacts with that industry at each step of the way. The Nym Mixnet intervenes in the industry at the very beginning. And this I find to be very, very powerful. The way to think about it is if we can establish a scenario where you have privacy by default, which basically means nobody can produce any data about you or your life or your relationships, your social relationships or your financial transactions or whatever else, without explicit consent or without some sort of clear, rules and guidelines around that, which is, implemented in the very technology itself. That's immediately a huge blocker on the otherwise concentration of power that happens as a result of big companies being able to grab whatever they want online, right? For me, this is a key valuable thing, and the Mixnet kind of addresses things at that level, but it also addresses, when we talk about ZK NIMS, which is our kind of credential system, that kind of hits the kind of mid-level, let's say the midway through that kind of data pipeline, because it has to do with okay, fine, we now have a bunch of data. It exists in some databases, data lakes, data trusts, whatever else. ZK NIMS and credential systems, they govern the access conditions to this data, right? And that's where we can kind of intervene with setting up new types of economic dynamics. We can set up new types of control over who can access what data under what conditions, which can, potentially bring that back to, organizations and people who should have control over this rather than just in the hands of big corporates. And then if we go to the far end of the data pipeline or the AI industry, we have the kind of implementation of AI tools. Now, it's cute to talk about ChatGPT. It's cute to start playing around with Midjourney and come up with all kinds of like funky little images, this, that, and whatever. But, of course, we have artificial intelligence or machine learning powering up surveillance and profiling and policing systems as well, and automated weaponry, as we were speaking about earlier. And that's where you need protection from the implementation of those types of systems of control. And that's where the Nym Mixnet, again, becomes very powerful, right? So it's like really at both ends. When we're talking about the Mixnet, we're talking about both ends of the data pipeline. We're talking about blocking the production of data from in the very beginning. And we're talking about protecting yourself, at the very end, protecting yourself from the implementation of surveillance or artificial intelligence that powers, new surveillance systems by basically hiding your metadata, right? Preventing metadata leaks that can otherwise be used by AI-driven surveillance systems. And then when we're talking about ZK-NIMs, we're really talking about that kind of midpoint in the data pipeline. Okay, Alexis didn't manage to go into all of that in his presentation, but he gave a nice brief overview of what the Nym Mixnet is and why it's important in the context of AI. So that was like the first part of the masterclass. And then we had Chelsea give a fantastic talk also that went into a little bit of her own background in the area and what excites her when it comes to machine learning. And then we had Meredith give a fantastic overview of basically the political economy of the space. And when I say political economy of this space, that might be a little bit abstract to some of you, but what I mean by that was, really talking about who are the companies involved, what's at stake here. And having her explain that is such an important antidote to, the kind of way that AI is otherwise talked about as this human versus machine type of scenario. And it's this big misunderstanding where people think like, oh, our machine's going to take over everything, where it never really works out that way, right? It's not about machines versus people. It's about some people building some machines that, yes, are, going to have negative impact on other people and their types of, their kinds of relationships to technology. So Meredith really points that out. She points out who exactly is winning from this, what companies are involved, what's at stake when it comes to social dynamics, and what's the hidden labor behind, right? So who are all these people that are doing all the labeling on these data sets, looking through, hundreds of hours of videos of horrible violence, this, that, and whatever. What are the working conditions? And like basically what are the kind of hidden dynamics behind what on the surface comes across as intelligence, but which is basically large scale statistics that can automate certain kind of predictive aspects. So I think like the two of, Chelsea and Meredith both did a fantastic job there. We had, to round up the session again, we kind of brought it really down to a practical level. We had Vincent Neumann from Swissnex join us and talk a little bit about how, Swissnex are supporting privacy technologies in the region and are running various programs right now to support startups between Brazil and Switzerland. From his perspective, he was very happy to be there and is very keen to support Nym in our work exactly because what they want to do is to support the kind of development of a different paradigm for technology than what we're seeing in the kind of Silicon Valley, US and China nexus right now, because both are very much heavily addicted to the surveillance paradigm. So that was kind of the setup. And it was a really good masterclass. I mean, I was also, I have to say, very excited to see just how packed the room was. Normally when you put on, a privacy-focused event at especially the mainstream technology conferences, it doesn't get this kind of participation. But before the masterclass started, I had this funny moment where me and Chelsea were in the room chatting, and Chelsea had just come from an interview And the rest of the room was completely empty. And one of the Web Summit organizers came up to me and was like, do you want to start the session now? And I was like, yeah, but I think we might not be much point if nobody's going to show up. And she was like, no, we have a huge queue outside. I was just waiting for you to give the green light. And she opened the door and it just flooded in with people. I mean, we had a queue that went down, the stairs, several floors down to, from second floor down to the ground floor. It was people waiting outside to come in. So I think the combination of privacy and AI and really understanding, what's at stake in this industry and what's at stake with technology development right now is something that people are genuinely extremely interested in.
Well, that makes me want to listen to the recording even more. So please get it to me ASAP because it sounds like a super interesting event. Now let's zoom out a little bit actually and follow up on this amazing masterclass that you guys gave. For context, for those who don't know, this whole thing, this AI craze that we have right now started in 2017, I believe, when there were some breakthroughs in AI research when it comes to large language models. So everything that you see, whether that's ChatGPT or whether that's other use cases of generative AI, even like image generating AIs, all of that stuff is based on this scientific discovery that large language models are capable of doing more than just language, whether it's generative or language comprehension. And then the rest is history. So 5 years later, we have in 2022 ChatGPT launching, reaching 100 million daily active users, the fastest in history of any app. And then now we have this very active conversation going on about AI. Like, if you haven't heard about AI in the past 2 months, then I don't know where you live, because it's absolutely everywhere. And it really just like flooded our channels, and everything is about AI now. But my question to you, Jaya, is whether the privacy implications of AI are discussed enough, because AI is not new. So AI has been pointed ever since about 2014, 2015, has been pointed at your brain to mine your attention as a resource for ad revenue. So that AI has been around for a really long time, but now we actually get to interact with AI and see how powerful it is in a way that we can instinctively understand. Like, we can sit down, type in some prompts, and then talk to it. So that's what gives it relevance in the world. Has that changed? So is it a new type of discussion that is required when it comes to the privacy aspect of AI, and also the question is whether that conversation exists or not at all?
It doesn't exist enough, but that's why we did this masterclass. That's why we're kind of hammering on about it. That's why Meredith is literally on an insane media spree, and I don't know how many interviews, articles, and podcasts she's done in the past few weeks, but it's been a lot. It really is time to kind of put privacy at the core of the debate. But I think the reason why, what is new now is, like you say, it is the large language models, and that kind of gives a completely different view on things for people, especially from the kind of end user perspective. Wait, what was your other question? Oh yeah, so when it comes to privacy tech, I think from my perspective, there is a lot that can and should be critiqued about the AI industry as an industry and as a kind of concentration of power, and especially certain terminology like AGI are basically artificial general intelligence. The whole idea around that is like basically surveillance propaganda. So, and the way to think about this is that AGI is it's a setup, it's a dream, and it's a scam, is what Harry would say, kind of quite straightforward, around the idea that there is such a thing as a general intelligence. And when we're talking about general artificial intelligence, what that intelligence would need in order to become generalized is an endless amount of data about the world, right? So it becomes essentially a surveillance machine with a never-ending appetite to know everything about everybody. I'm fundamentally against that for a variety of reasons, and I think we can do a little bit of a deep dive on that in a minute, Pseudo, if you want to.
Definitely.
But before that, I would like to kind of take a little bit of a step back and talk about the fact that privacy technologies is not just a blocker on AI. It actually is it's an important intervention to steer the artificial intelligence tools, in a direction that is more meaningful for a broader set of people. Personally, I'm not against these tools. I find them fun to use. I think there's lots of really interesting, super creative things that can come out of playing around with these models. And I don't just mean large language models, but in general, developing, new kinds of machine learning algorithms. I think it can be a very creative process. what privacy technology does is it just changes the power dynamics of that. And that's what I find so important and so fascinating, because it means that you don't have large language models that are literally just scraping whatever crap is out there and available and throwing it into a system and then pretending that this is some kind of universal or great, like some kind of magical intelligence that has arrived out of nowhere, right? When it's actually just the collective statistical garbage from all of humanity. When you block that kind of hose pipe of data, which the internet frankly is right now, then you can start making much more sensible decisions around what type of data is created in the first place and what type of machine learning algorithms we want to train in the first place and how we train them. It's almost like thinking of these as, instead of a centralized super intelligence, which is like an incredibly authoritarian and incorrect way of understanding artificial intelligence. And we think of these as basically like these little agents, right, that get trained to do this, that, whatever, and that actually inhabit different perspectives on what matters in the world. So for me, when it comes to privacy technologies and how it intersects AI, it's not about blocking the development of AI full stop. It's about changing the power dynamics. And it's about making sure that AI develops in ways that explores the full spectrum of interesting possibilities that are here once we are able to involve a much broader set of people into the decision making of what should actually be created in the first place.
Before that deep dive, let's talk a little bit about what a privacy-preserving AI would look like, because there's this interesting situation where you have an AI, generative AI, which is this black box. It was trained on all of this vast amounts of data, and then it spits out these really nice answers to your questions. Basically, that's how we.
Or it spits out like really horrible answers, right? Like
Exactly.
there's also these really like weird kind of incidents where there was some professor at some university in the United States that got like the police knocked on his door, and all of a sudden he found out that there was like some news articles going on about him about some kind of sexual abuse, which turned out to be which stemmed from like a completely like made up story that generative model had created about him, which then got published in a newspaper. Like the whole thing was like completely like weird and twisted out of this world. Yeah, it's a bit of a kind of like fucked up weird mechanism right now. I mean, that's like one crazy story. There's also like people's, personal bank details, this, that, and whatever that have been revealed by these things, because that's what happens when you just like you have a machine that grabs whatever is available and not protected.
Exactly. And that kind of brings us to my questions. Someone could make the argument that, if we do the whole privacy thing, then we may limit these amazing tools, in getting even better.
I would say it's the opposite.
Yeah.
We limit these tools so they can become better, because you have more correct information and you have information that is actually relevant to the people that might be affected. But I think there's more interesting kind of, if we think about privacy, again, like to think about the kind of full data pipeline, like I was explaining earlier, like one thing is like what goes into this machinery, right? What goes into this kind of mechanism? And that's, that is a huge privacy question. It's like, who gets to determine like what gets fed to the algorithms in the first place, which right now is completely out of control. But there's something else that has to do with like who gets to use the models down the line. And I think there was an interesting, this is more kind of on the case of censorship circumvention, a type of use case that I'd not really thought about before, but where I think it was Matthew Green that did a whole tweet thread on the idea of AIs like being kind of small repositories of knowledge systems that people can just send to each other in a text message. You send over an AI model instead of a link to a website or whatever else, and people can query that and find out all kinds of things. So I think there's like really interesting, super interesting potential use cases here.
The reason I asked this is because probably it's just my assumption that this line of argumentation is coming very soon when it comes to an actual debate forming around the privacy implications of AI, which is already quite abstract, because it's already quite difficult to, for example, prove that, hey, I'm an artist and your image generator is using my intellectual property. How do you prove that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. But actually, again, some fantastic people have already worked on this stuff. There's some friends of mine in Berlin that have created an incredible project called Spawning, And in fact, these are probably some of the kind of pioneers in the area of culture and AI. Holly Herndon is a musician who she started training her voice, or training a model on her voice, and also training a model on audiences. So, like quite a few years ago now, she would open up her concert with a kind of seance about AIs, where she would kind of get the audience to speak to the AI and train the AI with her. And then later on, she'd start making music with this, the kind of the audience's input that had been kind of gathered over, many, many concerts. And so she developed this, she started making music with AI, and then her and her partner developed this project called Spawning, which was in collaboration with one of the main open data sets for image generation. They were keen on developing a new direction in the AI industry towards what they call consensual AI. And so Spawning and Lion is the name of the people that have the data set, these big data sets. They collaborated on creating mechanism for artists to actually search the data sets, the databases for their imagery, and then withdraw the rights if they wanted to, or consent to its usage and start to become remunerated. It's not insurmountable problems, like these are solvable problems, and people are actually doing that. Like people are making practical efforts towards this direction. So, and for me, like the idea of consensual AI, I think is super fun. I think we can go far with that. I am toying a little bit with trying to find a slightly different term, because I feel like the word consent has kind of been a little bit tainted since the GDPR cookie consent experience. Like we need to find something that's like not just consensual AI, but maybe like I don't know, like personalized. I don't know. Sovereign AI is the wrong word, because it sounds like it's the AI that's sovereign, but like our own AI, something like this. I'll dig out some links, guys. Don't worry. Here, Spawning. Hang on.
Yeah, the cookie consent thing is really just the middle finger from companies annoyed by having to do it, basically, much more so than...
Yeah.
The idea was good, right? The intentions were okay, but then it turned into... It hurt some interests, I guess.
Yeah.
That were not happy about it.
Cool. So that's the link to the Spawning project, where artists can withdraw their consent if they want to, and it talks a little bit about the thinking and philosophy behind. I put a link to Holly Herndon, the musician I was telling about, and then Lion, which is the kind of one of the main open image data sets that people are training their models on. And another community that's worth checking out is Hugging Faces, which is a company that, in fact, Spawning have just partnered with them. And it's one of the probably most active communities around open models, not just the data set itself, but the models that actually train on the data sets, kind of toying around with those from a kind of open perspective. Like open AI that generated ChatGPT, unfortunately is not open at all, but Hugging Faces is. So it's worth checking out that community if you're interested in getting involved. To be honest, like I'm not gonna lie, I give you guys a bit of a hint that I'm quite keen to start talking to these people more about how to incorporate privacy technology into this process of consensual AI. So
that's super interesting.
What should we end off on? I mean, there was a couple topics.
One conclusion, or like one take-home message for me, is that we either need to have you on more often to talk about this stuff, or we need to make these community calls like 3 hours, because I feel like we could have gone on for about that long. But we do have some community questions, some related, some less so. So Hound is asking when we can have a preview of the mobile app, and I asked which one, whether it's NymConnect or the wallet or something else. And he said both.
That is a good question. And we are absolutely, it's our main focus at the minute from the product perspective, is getting mobile sorted, because it's been a long time coming. There have been a couple of technical hurdles that we're just working out at the minute, so I am a little bit hesitant this week to give you an exact timeline on it. But I would say that within, the next few weeks, we want to get something in front of your faces to test out. A fully working mobile wallet is not going to happen for some time. NymConnect, however, it looks like we've got a kind of good in there. Apologies for the vague question.
Well, if you frequent our DevRel AMAs, then this is where we answer soon TM. That's standard response there.
Yeah. The other reason why I'm hesitant to answer that is because I don't want to step on my colleague Jess's toes. This is she'll bite my head off if I say the wrong thing here.
Yeah, that's not a good toes to step on. Definitely. Let's avoid that. Another thing that came up with Jaya during our previous conversation about this is that if you want something that you can use from mobile and it's the wallet, then you have better chances of using our web extension wallet, which is probably coming out sooner. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff, then probably the web extension wallet is coming out sooner than the mobile wallet. When is that, Jaya? Do you have a more than a soon TM response for that?
No, soon TM, soon TM. But you are absolutely correct in mentioning that. It is the web extension will become first.
All right. And Nick is asking next whether there is any way to extract private data from services like ChatGPT. So has anybody been able to, like you said, you mentioned, I haven't heard this story, by the way, but you mentioned that someone was able to like stumble upon someone else's like social security number or credit card details or something like that.
Yeah.
Is this something that you can do?
You mean if it's possible to withdraw consent around the use of your private data in ChatGPT? Is that the question?
My understanding is that can you extract existing data from it, like personal data that should not be accessible to you about someone else? That's how I understand the question.
I feel like I have seen some examples of that. A slightly related topic is actually, and I think this is also going to be. So one thing that I mentioned earlier that I wanted to get back to was this concept of privacy washing, which is something that I think is going to start happening more and more. And that has to do with like things like zero knowledge proof and homomorphic encryption, and the fact that like, we have these cryptographic techniques now that allow for computation on encrypted data. I saw, already maybe like 6-7 years ago, people in the kind of privacy tech and AI scenes start to talk about like, oh, this is fantastic. We can have the perfect marriage between privacy and still making data available for AIs to train on. Which, like, to my mind is just like there's something really dodgy going on there, because essentially what it amounts to is like a perspective on surveillance, which is like, as long as a human is not looking at the data, then it doesn't count as surveillance. But to my mind, that's not the point. To my mind, what counts is, what that data is being used for. Whether my personal data is fully encrypted, but it's still being used to train, automated drone strikes, like I'm still not going to be happy with that. Like that to me is still a type of authoritarianism, which I would associate with, full-blown surveillance. And so, like, I think that's what we're going to see, like, really, like, the AI industry is going to have, like, serious problems convincing the rest of the world that they should be. I'm hoping that people understand the technical details of what's going on here, and the potential ethical issues that are what's going on here, because we are going to see situations where people's personal data is being used to train algorithms with this kind of privacy washing happening, and with the idea that like as long as it's encrypted, it shouldn't matter, right? So like to coming back to Nick's question, like that's kind of the weird stuff that could start to happen. Is like people's personal information will be like might come out in really awkward ways from these models, because like it's supposedly encrypted, it's supposedly not accessible, it's supposedly safe and secure and whatever else, but models are still training on them. And so you ask it the right question and some really weird leaks can start to happen. Like I think we're going to see some really weird stuff. The industry is freaking out about this. That's why you saw like quite soon after these multimodal models came out and GPT-4 came out, that's when you immediately start to see not just regulators, but also technologists be like, yo, we need to like halt. We need to stop for a minute until we work out some of these bigger problems. So, the industry has slowed down because of some of these questions.
Can I ask you something? It's a bit of an off topic, I think, for us, but I'm super interested to hear your take on it because we never actually discussed this. What do you think about the whole alignment thing? Do you think it will be possible to align increasingly powerful AI, especially when they start to become self-improving? And point blank, I'm going to ask: are we going to go extinct because of AI?
We're not going to go extinct because of AI. We're going to go extinct because of the climate crisis.
Okay, that's much better. Phew, I thought, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Yo, the climate crisis is going to kill us far before AI. And also there's like there's a resource problem here too, Yeah, we can easily stop AI by not feeding it. I agree with that. And also like there's computational limitations, there's environmental limitations that people oftentimes ignore if they're only looking in the world of maths, right? Lithium shortage and whatnot. It's like, computation is not forever. But yeah, the climate crisis is a context, it's a bigger context to this whole debate that, again, is often ignored. We had the famous case, some of you might be interested in, Timnit Gebru, who's was one of the core people in the Google ethics team. She got fired from Google for doing analysis on the environmental impact of large language models. So she published a paper that basically showed that there's some pretty major environmental impact here, and she got fired for it. And the Google ethics team got shut down. And so, there was the case of Hinton who left Google AI, a couple weeks ago, but the reaction from the rest of the community was like, yo, you left just now, but like the entire ethics team was fired like a few years ago and you didn't lift a finger, because a lot of the problems that he was pointing out, it's been pointed out by many of his colleagues before.
Yeah. For context, folks, by the way, large language models and most AI of the kind are running on GPUs, which are notoriously power hungry, and they're running on a lot of GPUs. Now, I don't know if that rings a bell to you guys, but crypto space is getting a lot of flack for environmental impact as well. But the major difference between many GPUs doing AI work and many GPUs doing mining is that like mining is the first and only industry which was ever directly incentivized to actually go green, while that's not the case with AI. So ironically, if you look at the very often shouted in our faces environmental impact data of something like Bitcoin mining, it's like actually much less bad, I should say, than large language models and the GPU power that it requires to train them. Anyways, that was my riff. Any closing thoughts, Jaya? Because we're bumping up against our time.
Yeah, and I actually have another meeting that I'm late for already, so I'm very sorry. I'm gonna have to bounce, but a pleasure being in the room with everybody again. As usual, if anyone wants to ping me and say hi or have any follow-up questions or whatever, absolutely feel free to get in touch.
Thanks for coming on, Jaya. Beautiful conversation as always, and see you hopefully sometime soon. And that brings us, because my guest is actually gone, so that brings us to the sad but beautiful ending of this week and also this community call. So huge thanks for everybody for joining. One last thing I wanted to talk about. No, actually two last things I wanted to talk about. I wanted to brag about my new microphone. Hopefully you enjoyed the sound quality of this community call, and this is going to be the new standard because I just bought a Blue Yeti X. It's a huge mic, very difficult to carry around, but anyways, it at least sounds nice. And the other thing is that since we're on this quest to get feedback from you guys about various aspects of the community and what it feels like to be here, I've been fishing for feedback about these community calls for quite some time, but I never actually got any, or rarely did I get any. So we actually put together a survey, a really quick one. It's even shorter than the vibe check that we recently put out. So Nick will hopefully share a link to it in the chat, and I would really appreciate if you guys filled it out. It's just basically to check, how it feels to be on these community calls, and maybe who else you would want to see as guests, what kind of topics you would want covered, and anything else that comes to mind. Basically, it's just a very quick one. So big thanks for joining, everybody. Have a lovely weekend. Oh, and also POAPs. I almost forgot about POAPs, though. So actually, there are three things that I wanted to talk about. So our amazing Pizza Jay created POAPs for this community call, but the bot that is used for dispensing them is broken again. So you need to DM Pizza Jay. I'm going to tag him in the chat over here. Please send him a DM to claim your POAP for this call. Once again, I would like to wish everybody a lovely weekend. Catch you later, guys. Bye-bye.